Hey, Shelley. Just wanted to check in with you. We've been working our way through the Iliad, 10 books in, and I'm really enjoying the experience this time around, and I hope you are too. You had a question for me about what I'm looking to get out of the Iliad, out of the reading of it, and I wanted to address that. And this might be a rather lengthy response. Um, because the more I thought about it, the more I had to say on it. So, great question. I'm glad you asked, Shelley. So, what I'm hoping to get out of the Iliad really boils down to a couple of things. First of all, I'm hoping to get a stronger foundation of one of the greatest influential texts in the Western canon. There's no denying the Iliad and the Odyssey both have far reaching influences on poetry, on essays, on fiction, nonfiction throughout all of history. A lot of literature coming after it has hints and little bits and pieces. For instance, I earlier this year I read the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown, and one of the most delightful moments was very early in this book, and picking up on the Telemons and seeing how that points back to the Telemanus faction in Red Rising and just the similarities in size and proportion and how that shaped how Pierce Brown wrote that set of characters in there. And so that's a delightful experience as to be able to pick up on those references as you go and to see that and be like, okay, I know where that came from and I know what that means. And that's something that you can't really get without having read the source material. And it's been long enough now that I don't remember much of anything of the source material. Like most people, I know the overarching plot that is spurring the action forward, but I couldn't have told you anything about the tale being told here and what happens and any of those dynamics along the way that we've been able to see. So one of the I find that because this is a reread for me, even though it's been long enough that it's practically a new read, but that leads into the philosophy of rereading things and what that brings to the table. And I find that in rereading things, even if it's only been a year or two since my last reread, as I can attest to with something like The Hobbit, which I read almost every year, you see new things as you're going through, little details, little hints and references, especially in ones that are very layered, like what Tolkien's works are. He's got hints to things to come and things that he's written that never actually got officially published during his lifetime. That is just a delight when you come across those and you're able to make that connection. And so rereading helps you see those things and the little details. That you'll get on your first read through an idea of the scenes of the sweeping narrative, the massive arc. But one of the reasons I've always enjoyed rereading books is because of what you take away from it every time you see something new. It's like watching a movie or TV show multiple times. You'll catch little things here and there. That's, oh, I didn't even pick up on that the first 3 times I watched this. But now I see that, and that's absolutely great. I'm appreciating it even more on a deeper level. And the same holds true with rereading things. And so that's why I think there's a great value in rereading. Not only that, but because you are a different person when you're rereading it than you were when you read it the last time. Even if it's been a year, you've changed. You are a different person than you were a year ago because you have experiences over the last 365 days that have shaped you into a different version of you than you were 365 days ago, even if you are still uniquely still yourself, and that you don't know that you've changed. And that's something that I find is true, especially when I read the Bible. So my apologies for those of you that are going to be reaching for the stop button, because I'm going to talk about the Bible here, but it's inescapable. As a Christian, I am constantly reading and rereading the Bible. I've read the entire Bible cover to cover only once, but ever since then, I've been reading with a shotgun approach through different things throughout it. And every time I revisit parts of the Bible, even ones that I know really well and have a deep love for, like the book of Joshua or the book of Job, I gain a deeper appreciation upon revisiting those things, because it solidifies not only in my mind what all is in there and what's happened and the little nuances, but I'm able to just get that joy from revisiting something that I genuinely love. And I think the Iliad is going to end up in that camp of something that I genuinely love. And just like with a lot of other works, I'm finding that even though this has at the end notes on, this one doesn't, but if it did have footnotes or endnotes or anything like that, I wouldn't be using it on what is essentially a first time revisiting this work, because this time through I'm trying to gain a foothold on what is happening, who the main players are, the overarching narrative that's being told, who's doing what, how things are impacted by all of that. And then on further rereads, I would also then revisit the footnotes and the context and the commentary that an author might provide. And that's why I love getting things like the landmark Julius Caesar, which I just finished reading. It's got all kinds of maps and charts and footnotes galore, and I had to ignore almost all of that on my way through, because I don't have as deep of an understanding of that on my first time through. But on a reread, I'll be able to immerse myself in those, and that's why I love going through my annotated Hobbit, because I know the story of the Hobbit well enough now. I've experienced enough times that I'm okay with stopping mid-paragraph even to read what comes alongside it, to gain those deeper connections and understandings, and to experience it in an even deeper way than I ever had before. So I don't know if that answers your question fully or not, Shelley, but I do enjoy revisiting things that, even if I knew it well, I would still have been completely happy to revisit. The same held true for Fahrenheit 451. This is one that I had reread multiple times. Every couple of years, I've reread this ever since I first encountered it. And I love it every single time and have a deeper appreciation every time. And I found that having read it with a group, with you and with the other wonderful folks that joined us in the Eclectic Book Club last month, you gain an extra layer of understanding, appreciation, joy in talking about these things with somebody else who's reading it at the same time, whether it's their first time or they're revisiting it, because everybody brings unique approaches to and unique understandings to the works, and they might catch things that you would have missed and had missed for 5 times through that book. And even if they didn't add anything and enhance anything to it, just having that discussion just helps it become a more joyful process and an enriching process. I've always found that I learn more by teaching something and discussing something than I do by just doing something in isolation. I'm the type of person that if I had more patience, if I was accepting myself to just read really slow and immerse myself in it and highlight or annotate or journal about what I'm reading, I think that I would really enjoy that process. And unfortunately, BookTube doesn't encourage that kind of slow reading process. And I think that in 2022, I'm going to try to be more mindful with my reading habits and accept that I might get through only 20 pages in this next hour, but I'm going to be taking notes and annotations and various things and interact with the text in multiple ways to where it just really enhances that process. And one of the things that going back to the discussing with others, one of the things I always tell my comp students when they start working on providing peer reviews to each other on what they're working on, they have to give suggestions on some changes or some possible ways to alter what they've been working on to each other. And I always remind them that you should, regardless of what is said, always, always. Okay, you'll have to try again. You always need to at least consider what the other person is saying. And that holds true with the discussion. So even if somebody you think it might be missing the point on something or stating something that you didn't quite see the same way or that you disagree with, which doesn't happen nearly as often when discussing a book, but regardless of what is being shared about it and your own interpretation on what happened or on what something means, I find this to be true with Bible study as well. The process of hearing what somebody else is saying and considering it instead of just outright dismissing it. Even if you ultimately decide that that's not what you think yourself, is very beneficial in growth. And that's why things like reading things that you don't necessarily agree with can be rewarding, because then you get at least a more of an understanding with the other side and what they think and what their perspective is. All this is a really long roundabout way of answering what was in essence a really simple question, Shelley. So thank you for the great question. And I don't know that I actually answered it satisfactorily to you. Maybe I did and then gave you more than what you wanted and what you needed. But I do have a question back for you on the Iliad. So we're approaching the halfway point in this book, and we have two very distinguished, established sides on this conflict. On both the level of men and the level of the gods. And so we have the multi-layered conflict, which I absolutely love. But you have two sides that are at odds with each other, and you get pieces of both sides along the way to kind of give you some insight in what's going on both sides of the conflict. So I want to know, Shelley, which side of the conflict do you sympathize more with? Do you align yourself more with? Which side of this conflict are you rooting for? Which team are you hoping is the one that's victorious, regardless of whether or not you know how it ultimately ends? You can still get caught up in, even if you know the side is the losing side, and thinking that this is the right side and they should have won. So I want to know, what side are you on and why? And for those of you that are reading along with or that have read it before, I'd like to know, either in the comments or in your own video, what side are you with in this conflict in the Iliad? Because ultimately, it's almost inevitable that you will place yourself on one or the other side. So I'm curious, because it's fascinating to me. to hear reasoning behind which one that you find yourself rooting for and why. So thank you, Shelley. I hope you have a great weekend. I look forward to hearing from you.